Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a great show for you. We are going to be delving into a little more of the college football playoff expansion. We talked about this when it first got voted on, I believe, a week or two ago. We talked about the 12-team expansion. They are already not even a week later, discussing expanding it once more with a new format. We're going to talk about that, why I think they're doing it, and some impacts of that decision to expand or think about expanding. In our second segment, we are going to continue the theme of football, of a college playoff expansion, this time talking about March Madness. We're going to talk about the possibility about them expanding. It seems like the most likely chance of it expanding since the last time it expanded back in 2011. We'll get into that a little bit. And then we will, in our third segment, continue our off-season baseball coverage, talking about the Kansas City Royals this time. And in our fourth segment, stick around for that. I put together my first mock draft of the season ahead of the Combine, which started just about 30 minutes ago. So we'll go through my pre-Combine mock draft, so stick around for that. Before we get too far into the show, though, I'd like to remind everybody that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. That's the link to leave a donation or a tip, leave a message with it. It'll scroll across the bottom of the screen. We appreciate anything you can give us, and we appreciate you watching. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I said, we have a big show for you today, so let's get right into it. We're going to start it off talking about college football playoff expansions. For those who were unaware, the college football playoff, as of a couple weeks ago, officially expanded from 4 teams to 12 teams. They adopted a 5+7 model. That 5+7 model means that the top 5 conference champions get an automatic qualification, and then the next 7 seeds go to the top 7 ranked teams in the country. So 5+7, it presumably gives 1 spot to each of the 4 power conferences that are left. And then the next 7 go to the 7 most deserving teams, which seems like a pretty good compromise for a lot of the issues in college football. You get a little bit of group of 5 representation. It covers all of the New Year's Six bowls, so you don't need to make any of those important bowls less important than they were already becoming. So you're not affecting that anymore. So 12 teams, we're going to test it out, see how it goes. I'm a big fan of how it is looking like it's going to go. But just a couple of days later, the NCAA College Football Committee decided that in 2 years they want to expand to 14. Now, it hasn't been voted on. It's nothing official yet, but it is looking at they are talking about putting it in. Thank you for the comment. When they were talking about the next 7 teams, they're going to do the regular playoff ranking that they are talking about. It's just going to be those top 7 ranked teams. So say SEC champion, ACC champion, Big Ten champion, and Pac-12 champion, they're all ranked in the top 5. Say it's 1, 3, 4, 5. That number 2 seed, that number 2 that didn't win their conference champion, they're going to get that number 5 seed. And then it would go teams ranked 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, so on down the line. Just the top 7 ranked teams, just like they do rankings nowadays. Thank you for the question, though. But the way that they've decided to do this 14-team model is something that really shows a lot about the concern that the NCAA is having. Yeah, that's right. That would be the top 7 teams outside of the top from each division. Exactly. So the way that they've decided to do this 14 team playoff is to really skew it towards the SEC and the Big Ten. The proposed model right now is the top 3 teams from the SEC, the top 3 teams from the Big Ten, along with the top 2 teams from the ACC and the top 2 teams from the Big 12, as well as one from the Group of 5, are all getting automatic qualifiers. So that leaves 3 at-large bids for the rest of college football, but it really is skewed more towards the SEC and Big Ten. Now, this isn't anything that is official yet, but we are looking at something down the line where, if you remember just a couple weeks ago, I believe at the beginning of February, the SEC and the Big Ten formed a sort of alliance. They made a coalition together. And I think the NCAA feels a little threatened by that. There have been rumors in the past of the SEC trying to make a super conference and split off from the NCAA. And with the introduction of NIL, with the transfer portal, and with the amount of money that is going into these sports, how it's becoming more of a business, pay-for-play type thing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think NIL is a good thing to have in the sport, figure out how it works, but the NCAA is losing its grip really quickly on these organizations. You know, the NCAA never really has power over these teams. The NCAA is here, not really making decisions, but just kind of as an overseer to these leagues. So the SEC has had rumblings of leaving in the past. Now, it hasn't been anything serious, and they claim that this alliance, this coalition with the Big Ten isn't a move to leave the NCAA. But if you were going to leave an organization like the NCAA, if you were going to be a conference as powerful, you have the two most successful conferences in the most profitable sport in that is football, basically banding together here, forming the starts of a league of their own type thing. You look at, if you were doing this, if you were in the NCAA shoes and you saw this happening, wouldn't you be a little scared that they were trying to leave? Wouldn't you be a little scared that your big money makers, your ringleaders are just gonna walk out on you? And with so many changes already happening, you've seen the Pac-12 dissolve into nothing like that. A Power 5 conference just disappeared into thin air. And it's gone now. You know, we're not getting that Pac-12 back. You get to be a little nervous. And you can look at this in a couple different ways. Way number one, the NCAA isn't worried about them leaving. They just want more money. And it's not really a positive thing either. The NCAA is supposed to be a non-profit organization, and yet they are raking in millions and billions of dollars every year in TV contracts and everything like that. They make so much money for a non-profit organization. And the other way you can look at it is desperation. The other way you can look at it is the NCAA begging the Big Ten and the SEC especially, to not leave. The way that it's set up for this, not only is this going to, if this proposal goes through, ruin the conference championship model. Bowl games have already been ruined. We're not getting bowl games back the way they were after this playoff, and especially now that it's expanded to 12 teams. We're not getting all of those bowl games. They are not going to mean as much ever again. And that's just how it's going to be. But if you make this happen where outside of one group of 5 conference, outside of the group of 5, these championships, these division conference championships, they're not going to mean anything. You just need to be top 3. You don't even need to win your conference championship game. You just need to make it. You don't even need to make it if you're in the SEC or the Big Ten. It's going to take away some of that competitive edge. It might even get rid of the championship game altogether. We've seen alliances form in the past, and they weren't as strong as this, and we don't know if they're going to be, if this one's going to, how long it's going to last. Because the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 formed an alliance of sorts back in 2021 that was shattered when the Big Ten took some teams from the Pac-12, and we saw how everyone started poaching from them. The NCAA is in a lot of trouble. If things continue the way that they're going right now, especially with the injunction that's been filed about a week ago again, saying that you can use NIL's money to recruit players. Again, that's not a decision; it's just an injunction to stop the NCAA from handing out any punishments. But having all that out there, having all of this kind of going against the NCAA all at once, it wouldn't be shocking to me if the NCAA implodes in our lifetime. You think about pillars of sports, you don't see leagues crumble all that often, especially ones as established as the NCAA. But each conference is getting more and more centralized to itself. They're getting more and more stuff all by themselves. They get their own TV contracts. They compete with each other. Now you see they have their own commissioners and everything. They answer to themselves. And now you see that they're making partnerships with each other outside of the NCAA. And as much as they can say that this isn't a move to, for lack of a better term, coup the NCAA, it definitely looks like one. So this proposed 14-team playoff, as much as I'm not a fan of it, it might be necessary for the NCAA to survive 30 years from now. And I don't think I'm being that outrageous when I say that. You look at the way that everything is going. They are losing their control of college sports, college football especially. They're losing everything. They're losing that grip, that tight grip that they had with amateurism. Does NIL make college players like pros to where they're worried about money more than trying to make it pro? I don't think necessarily the way it is right now. Thank you for the comment. But it might in the future. You don't know how much money is going to get put into it. But I think the real big part of this that's going to affect the future is that if the NCAA continues to make these concessions to the SEC and the Big Ten to keep their organization alive, it's going to kill the rest of the sport. It's going to make these conferences bigger than they are. And we've seen conferences that are the best at a sport for a really long time go down in productivity after a while. The SEC might be kings of football right now, but they're not going to be kings of football forever. The Big East in basketball, that used to be the big conference, and they're still good, but they're not the number one basketball conference anymore. They're one of the big six, but they're not that number one. And if the NCAA continues to make these special exceptions for these SEC and the Big Ten in football especially, they're going to continue. They might hold on to their organization a little longer, but eventually it's going to crumble. And I wouldn't be shocked if, like I said, within 30 years, the NCAA doesn't exist anymore, and it's just a collection of loose conferences, reorganized under another. I don't think college sports are going anywhere, but it'd be reorganized under a conference scheme where there isn't an overarching organization, or the NCAA has completely reformed into something else. But in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about college sports. We're going to transition into college basketball. March Madness is coming up. They're talking about expanding that as well. So stick around. We're going to be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I'll blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking through that break with me. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the new 14-team proposed format for the college football playoffs. We just took a look at what might become of the NCAA, especially football-centric. In this segment, we're going to continue talking about college sports, but we're going to move into college basketball. The big tournament in the year is coming up right around the corner. March starts tomorrow. So March Madness right around the corner. There has been more talks about expansion. There's been more talks about if they should expand, how they should expand. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be a bigger part of the show than you are right now, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation with a message. It'll scroll across the screen for me, you, and everyone to see. We appreciate anything you can give. But like I said, we're going to get right into this. The March Madness, should it expand? So a brief history of March Madness expansion before we get too far into what's happening. March Madness started in 1939. There were just 8 teams. The first tournament was won by the Oregon Ducks. They beat Ohio State 46-33. And it gradually expanded. It grew to 16 teams in 1951, 32 in 1975, and finally the full tournament as we know it today, or almost as we know it today, 64 teams, first time in 1985. They did add the first 4 in 2011, so we are at 68 right now, but the real tournament is still at 64. The new proposal that was voted on in January by the Board of Directors for the NCAA Division I, they approved the recommendation to expand it to 90 teams or 80 teams. I've seen 80 teams be talked about a little more. And I'm curious what the public thinks on this, because I've seen a lot of people higher up in organizations talking about what this might look like. I haven't heard a lot of opinions. Now, obviously, we just finished talking about the NCAA. They're a business. They're big on money. You know, the March Madness is one of the biggest money-making series of games in sports. You know, it's one of those things that makes, if you look at the numbers that they make on March Madness alone, I believe it's in the billions. So expanding it would be great for them, but for a competitive standpoint, I'm not so sure. There's coaches that are on the fence about it. Coaches are split. The great Tom Izzo, coach of Michigan State, said it could diminish the product, and I tend to agree with him there. You look at, with 64 teams already, these 15 and 16 seeds, they're not winning that many games. You know, you have 11 ever 15 seeds to win games, although there have been winners 3 years in a row. And as far as teams on the 16 seed line, they've only ever won twice. They've only ever won twice since 1985. Almost 40 years of basketball, and they've only ever won 2 games. When you combine the 15 and 16 seeds, they are 13 and 300 all time in that first round. It's not really expanding it isn't going to improve the product. They didn't have this stat. I went through every single first number 1 seed versus number 16 seed game that has ever been played, and I found the margin of victory numbers. The average margin of victory is 24.2 points. It's not a competitive basketball game, and that's already what it's at. Expanding it to 80 teams sure would be good for some of these mid-major programs. And here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network, we are all about mid-major programs, group of 5 schools getting that representation that they deserve, because they put a lot into athletics. These players that aren't on the Power 5 stage, they deserve to get as much recognition as those Power 5 players as well, because they play their hearts out every single night. So anything that helps them, usually we're here for on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. But for this one specifically, you look at the disparity between the 16 seeds and the 1 seeds that match up every year. And now imagine if they expand it to 90 teams. First of all, it's going to ruin the magic of the tournament a little bit. Having it at 64 teams kind of provides I don't want to call it a perfect tournament, but it kind of is, because you don't get any buys. And I think that's what makes March Madness so appealing. That's what makes it so much fun. You're playing games right in a row. Anything can happen in college basketball, and no one gets a bye. No one gets that extra special treatment other than getting a theoretically easier path if they are a higher seed. It's almost, and I hesitate to say a perfect tournament, because it's really hard to make something a perfect tournament, but it's just a really clean setup. It's very well put together, and making up to 90 teams, you're going to have to do a bunch of complicated buy stuff. It's simple to understand. You play one team, you move on, you move on, you move on. It's very well done. I love how it's put together right now. It's going to ruin the product, not just because they're going to be letting these teams that, quite frankly, don't have a shot at really making noise in the tournament. Like I said, there have only been 2 16 seeds to ever win a game. What do you think's going to happen when they expand it to 17 seeds and 18 seeds and get to 20 seeds? Do you think those teams are ever going to win a game? Sure, maybe then we see some 16 seeds win a couple more games because they'll be playing 4 and 5 seeds that might have a bad day. But you put these 20 seeds in, it's not going to be a 24-point game. It's going to be a 50-point game. It's going to be a 35, 40-point game. These games are going to be so uncompetitive. Like, right now, 24 points is a lot. It is. But you get these 16 seeds that can compete. You get these 16 seeds that can give teams a scare. We saw it last year. A 16 seed beat Purdue. We saw it a couple years ago when a 16 seed beat Virginia. Right now, it's never. It doesn't happen. Right? It's almost a lock that it doesn't happen. They win 1% of their games. But in the off chance that they do, that they are competitive, and it can happen when a 16 seed is competitive with a 1. If they expand it, not only is it going to make the bracket messy, and it's going to make it not as I guess, again, I'm just going to call it a perfect a perfect bracket, because that's really what it is. It's going to ruin that perfect bracket, and the level of competition is going to go down regardless. It is almost impossible to expand it, and I know there's 300 plus teams in the NCAA, and the reason that they're looking at expanding it is because they want 25% to make it. But are 25%, this is for a championship, are 25% of the teams really worthy of competing for a national championship? I'm not sure about that. There's teams that get in every year that probably aren't worthy of competing for a national championship. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't get a shot, especially if it's automatic qualifiers. But these at-large bids, you'd have to be adding about 30 more at-large bids to the system. And I don't think there's 30 more teams that deserve to compete for the national championship every year. Now, you see it where it gets to a point where, you have to expand because teams are getting too stacked. And I don't think we're at that point in college basketball. It happens a lot in pro sports, like the NBA. They expanded their league, and it fixed a lot of competitive balance issues. Right now, I think college basketball is at a good spot where it doesn't need to do this. This is as much fun as it is to have more March Madness. I love March Madness. As much fun as it would be to have more of it, expanding it really does not make a lot of sense. You want to put the best product out there for the fans to enjoy, and expanding it any more than this is only going to diminish it. It's only going to make the first round matter less. We're going to get to the point where, like bowl games, we don't care about a lot of them. We'll only start paying attention 2 rounds in when we're like, oh, now we go. I don't want that to happen to March Madness. And I'm not trying to be that old man waving a stick in the air saying change is bad, because I'm all for some change, but expanding it to 90, especially now, just doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe 10 years from now we can reassess and we can see if there's more deserving teams. If there's 30 more deserving teams. I'm fine if they wanted to expand it by 10 maybe, but making it 100 teams, 90 teams, it's not gonna do it. It's not worth it. It's not going to make the product any better. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Is it worth it to expand March Madness? Would you care if these first round games weren't competitive anymore? Would you still enjoy March Madness as much as you do right now? I don't think I personally would, but you never know. In our next segment, we are going to continue our coverage of the MLB offseason, this time taking a look at the Kansas City Royals. They had a pretty solid offseason after losing over 100 games last year. We're going to take a look at them, and in our fourth segment, I put together my first mock draft of the year ahead of the NFL Combine. So we're going to dive into my mock draft, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But stick around through this break. On the other side, we're moving into baseball. We'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in for the first time, we just finished talking about a bunch of college expansions, both in college football, the proposed 14-team expansion, before even playing a 12-team playoff, what that might mean, why they might be proposing it. That was our first segment. We just finished talking about the proposed expansion to March Madness. Talked about my thoughts on that, why I think it isn't the greatest idea. But in this segment, we are going to continue our coverage of the MLB offseason. We're going to be talking about the Kansas City Royals, talking about what they did in their offseason to improve from a miserable 2023 campaign. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you are right now, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. You can leave a comment with that tip or donation. It'll scroll across the bottom of the screen for you and everybody else to see, me as well. We'll have a little discussion. We appreciate everything you can give and do give. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I said, in this segment, we are going to be talking about the Kansas City Royals. The Kansas City Royals are a team that, quite frankly, sucked last season. They lost over 100 games. Their record was 56-106 last year. Not the place that you want to be, but for the Royals, a team in a small market, and that's something that in baseball matters a lot more than a lot of sports because there is no salary cap or salary floor. So these small market teams, you talk about the Oakland A's a little bit, they're not required to spend money, and it shows sometimes in that payroll and how good they are and how bad they can be for as long as they can be bad for. But the Royals had a really productive offseason. And for a team that lost over 100 games last season, they might have a really, really solid turnaround. You talk about some of their moves. They first and foremost locked up their young superstar, Bobby Witt Jr., to a 10-year, $280 million deal. A huge deal that, if he continues to develop the way that he is developing right now, it might be a steal. And it's crazy for me to sit here and say $280 million is a steal of a deal for someone. But the Royals, again, if Bobby Witt continues to develop the way that he has been developing in the past couple seasons, it's going to be huge. He's going to be that franchise cornerstone for them to build around. And I'm glad to see the Royals back competing. For those who don't remember, the last time they were good, 2014, 2015, they made it to back-to-back World Series, winning one of them. And then since they're a small market team, they couldn't re-sign everyone. So they kind of fell off a cliff. And now they're kind of building back. This team, for as bad as it was last season, they still had some pieces. You talk about aging star, Salvador Perez, one of the premier DH/catchers in his day. He was competing with Shohei Ohtani just a couple years ago for the home run crown. You still have a promising 1-2 punch. You had a promising 1-2 punch in the rotation with Cole Reagans and Brady Singer. And they added stuff to it. The arms were really the weak part of the Royals last season. The Royals struggled pitching. I believe they had the third worst ERA in the league for a starting pitching staff. So what they did is in this offseason, they went out and they got some pretty solid pitchers. They took Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo, both from the Padres last year. Michael Wacha put up 14 wins, 2.4 wins above replacement. That's one of his better seasons that he's had in his career. And Seth Lugo, who was back as a starter. He's done it before. He had a career-high starts, 26, and career-high innings. He pitched 146.1. And he also put up almost 2 WAR, 1.8. So these guys are coming off some really, really nice seasons. And joining Cole Reagans and Brady Singer at that top. Cole Reagans is a guy who has excellent strikeout stuff. He's averaging 11.2 strikeouts per 9 innings. That's elite in the league. Only, I believe, Spencer Strider has, there's a couple guys that are up there. Spencer Strider is leading the league there. I don't have his number pulled up, but I believe off the top of my head it was it was around 13, which is insane. When we talk about the Braves, we'll talk a little bit about him. And he also put up 2.4 WAR last season. They've kind of done an instant turnaround on that rotation, assuming that Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha can both do what they did last year. Now, both of those guys are a little older. They're both veterans. They both haven't always had the greatest seasons, but they're both coming off really nice years and coming to Kansas City, joining that pitching staff, that rotation. I think it can do wonders for this team. They also shored up that bullpen a lot. They went out and they got Will Smith. He had 22 saves last year. He's a veteran. And Chris Stratton. Both of those guys are giving up less than 1 home run per 9 innings. And, they're a little past their prime. They're a little older. They're both veterans. But they can give you quality innings on that back end. A bullpen that really was struggling a lot last year. Again, there's a reason they lost 106 games. And on the lineup side, like I mentioned, they locked Bobby Witt up as a Royal for the long term, and that's huge. That was the biggest move for them, not just for this season, but for many years to come, to have that homegrown guy, that superstar you can build your lineup around. And they went out and got some solid pieces. They got Hunter Renfroe, who is a solid middle of the order bat. He can hit for power a little bit. He's gonna be a solid bat in that lineup. And Adam Frazier, who isn't gonna hit for a lot of power, but he's a really good contact hitter, and his defense there at second base is gonna be huge. So they really had one of the more underrated off seasons, I would say, in the entire MLB. They brought in a lot of quality guys, not huge names, but a lot of guys that drastically improved that team. Looking ahead to 2024, it might sound crazy. They might be able to win their division. They might be able, in that AL Central, that is not that strong this year. You have the Guardians, who, if they click, it should be their division. They have a lot of talent up there in Cleveland, but they just love being an average baseball team. That's like their favorite thing to do, the Cleveland Guardians. They do it every year. The Twins also have a lot of talent, but they are so injury prone. It's tough to rely on them. They lost a couple pitchers in the offseason as well. And their key is health. They're another team that's very good if they can stay healthy. The White Sox are in shambles right now. They're not doing anything. And the Royals are kind of sneaky good. They had a really, like I said, a really underrated offseason. And then the Tigers, of course, who actually finished second in that division last season. They aren't quite ready to compete. They also have a couple young talents, but they're not quite there yet. So you look at this, if they were in any other division, I don't think they'd have a shot at the playoffs, because I don't think they're going to be good enough to make the wild card. But if they get a little lucky, the Twins get a little hurt, and the Guardians don't decide to play good baseball, then don't be surprised if the Royals go from losing 100 games to making the playoffs. Now, I don't think they're going to be playoff contenders. I don't think they're going to make it too far. I think they're probably a first-round exit. But getting them into the playoffs after what was an awful year last season is a huge accomplishment. Again, that's their ceiling. They could, like I said, if Michael Waka and Seth Lugo don't revert back to some of their worst seasons, and then they probably won't. But you look at that pitching staff; they brought in a lot of solid guys. That defense is just going to get better with Adam Frazier now at second, and Hunter Renfroe can flash the leather a little bit. But yeah, I'm very. It's a very nice offseason there by the Kansas City Royals. We're looking at a ceiling, like I said, division winning ceiling. First round exit most likely, but division winning nonetheless. As for their floor, they're going to be better than last season. I have no doubt in my mind about that. I think this team is absolutely on the right track. But third or fourth in their division is their floor. So there's a lot of different outcomes for this season. I'm going to my prediction, they're going to finish second. I think they'll finish third in their division. Ahead of the Tigers and White Sox. I think they'll be competing with the Twins, with the Guardians or Twins for that second division spot. I don't think they're quite going to make the playoffs this year, but they have that ceiling that they could do it. I still think as long as the Twins stay healthy, it's their division. But the Royals, I think they could be one of those teams that's drastically improved from last year. They had a really, really nice offseason. Coming up in our final segment, I made a mock draft. We're going to the NFL. The NFL Combine started today. It's going on right now. I put out my first mock draft. We're going to go over that, talk about we're going to go in depth on the top 10 and then talk about some of the more interesting picks. If you have a team you want me to talk about, go ahead and leave that in the comments, and we will get to that in just a second. But if you stick around, like I said, we are moving on to NFL Mock Draft 1.0 by me. So stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around through that break. If you were just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Kansas City Royals, what their offseason looked like, and what I expect them to do in 2024. We also talked a little about NCAA playoff expansion, both in college football and in college basketball in segments 1 and 2. You can check those out on YouTube. We appreciate everyone so much for tuning in and sticking with us through that break. But like I said, the NFL Combine is underway today, which means that draft season has officially started. Not that it wasn't going on before, but the draft season, the full primetime draft season is officially underway. And to celebrate that, I put together my first mock draft of the season, Jeremy's Mock Draft 1.0. We're going to go over that, talk about some reasoning. We'll go in depth on the top 10 picks. And then outside of that, if you have any teams you want me to cover, I'm going to run through all of them that I got. If you have any teams you want me to cover, go ahead and leave that in the comments. We'll talk a little bit about those teams. But before we get into the mock draft, just a reminder that if you would like to be a bigger part of the show than you are right now, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation with a comment. It'll go across the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about it. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Appreciate anything you do decide to give, and we appreciate you all for tuning in to the show. But like I said, I finished my first mock draft. The NFL Combine has just started today. Leap year Thursday, Combine begins. And what better time than to go over the first mock draft that I have. We put this together. Lots of thought. We were cooking this up in the lab. And we'll start off with number one. Number one overall pick, Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears. Now, I don't think this is that controversial of a pick. It might be right. It is a little bit right now because the Bears have yet to officially decide what they are doing with Justin Fields. Rumors are that the trade is all but done to the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not sure how true that report actually is because there weren't a lot of sources that were linked in there, or other people that confirmed that report. But him to the Falcons seems like it's all but done right now, until new information comes out. So it seems like they're going to trade him, and it makes sense. It's the right thing to do. Caleb Williams is a better prospect. It resets the clock on that team. So Caleb Williams to the Bears at number one. And at number two, the Commanders. Here's where it gets interesting, because when you're doing a mock draft, you can do it one of two ways. You can do it, what would I do if I was the GM? Or you can do it, what do you think's going to happen? I took the latter of those options, what I think is going to happen. And personally me, I would take Drake May here with that second overall pick. But the Commanders seem to have fallen in love. All reports are saying that they really like Jaden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. So that's who I have them taking here. Now, like I said, if I were the Commanders GM, I would take Drake May here at 2. Not to say that Jaden Daniels is a bad draft pick. I just think that he's a better fit for the Commanders, a team that needs a little more of a quarterback that can read the field a little better in Drake May. So that's what I would do. But I have the Commanders taking Jaden Daniels here, which means the Patriots at 3 have a really tough decision to make. Now, you can take Marvin Harrison. He's going to be really good no matter what. Or you can take Drake May, a guy who in a lot of other drafts would be the number one overall pick, and you're getting him here at 3. So if I'm the Patriots, I'm doing one of two things. If Drake May is available to me, I am taking him here, and that's what I have them doing since I had the Commanders taking Jaden Daniels at 2. If he is not on the board at 3, I'm drafting Marvin Harrison. We've seen what Marvin Harrison can do with, frankly, a really bad quarterback situation in Ohio State. So Marvin Harrison would be a really good pick here as well, but I have them taking Drake May in this draft, which means Marvin Harrison falls into the laps of the Cardinals, a team that desperately needs a wide receiver, a team that desperately needs someone to stretch the field. You had Greg Dortch out there running a lot of routes. It's not something that you want your wide receiver one. You don't want him to be your wide receiver one. Hollywood Brown, as good of a talent as he is, he probably shouldn't be your main wide receiver threat either. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to make a huge difference for the Cardinals. So that's what I have them taking. I don't think that is too controversial at all. Next for the Chargers, I've seen this pick go a lot of different places. I've seen them going offensive line. I've seen them going wide receiver. I've seen them going tight end. John Harbaugh is a guy that likes to run the ball. And that lends me to having them take either a tight end or a offensive tackle. I have them taking Brock Bowers because he is a guy that can block for that running game, and he also has the skill set of a wide receiver at tight end. Having an elite tight end nowadays can make a huge difference. You see how Travis Kelce transforms offense. You see what George Kittle can do. He might not have the greatest production every single game, but he's always a huge part of that offense. So having Brock Bowers there for Justin Herbert, he's going to be a great weapon for him, and he can help out in the run game. So that leaves the Giants here with a really interesting decision. I'd have him taking wide receiver here. We talked a little bit about it last show, that I think Daniel Jones gets one more year with the Giants because it's going to be tough to move off of him. Maybe they grab a quarterback in the second round. If I was doing a second-round mock, that's what I would have them do. I'd have them take a guy like Michael Penix in the second round. But Rome Odunze is a guy that really is excelling at the catch point. And that was something that the Giants really struggled with, contested catches last season. Now, it'd be great. They struggle with a lot of things, but they were trying to get it up to Darren Waller, and he just couldn't come down with those contested catches a lot. There were at least 2 games, maybe 3, I can think of, the Bills, the Eagles, and no, I think that was it. Just those 2 games that the Giants lost last season because Darren Waller couldn't come up with that contested catch. And it's not all on him. There were a lot of things wrong with the New York Giants last season. But I've got him taking Rome Odunze at that number 6 spot, which leads the Titans here at number 7, who need a lot of stuff as well, taking Joe Alt in the offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. You know what they say, build the trenches first and good things will happen. You need a good offensive and defensive line. They're the anchor of your team, both of them. So getting a cornerstone there at 7 is going to be huge for them as they go into full rebuild mode. In this mock, since the Bears are trading Justin Fields, I needed to decide a team that had him. And that decision for me was the Falcons. So I've seen a bunch of people mocking a quarterback to the Falcons, mocking a corner, but I think a bigger need is edge rusher. Get some pressure on the opposing quarterback. I have him taking Dallas Turner out of Alabama. Now, a lot of people have him taking a corner, and that's the other position that I'd have him take if they weren't going to take a edge rusher. But I think their passing defense with Jesse Bates over the top and A.J. Terrell shutting down one side, it's good enough. It's not the biggest weakness right there. Which means Malik Neighbors falls into the Bears' laps at 9. And if this is the draft that they get, if they can get one of those top 3 receivers and Caleb Williams, you can't leave that draft sad. They could not pick another player for the rest of the draft, and you can't leave that draft sad. That is a excellent draft for the Bears if they can get one of those guys. And Malik Neighbors is super explosive. I was playing around with this mock, switching Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors. I ended up putting Rome Odunze at 6, but I think that could switch. I think the Giants and the Bears, as long as nothing changes, obviously things will change. I think they get those 2 receivers. And to finish out the top 10, the Jets, they need offensive line bad. They need offensive line really, really bad. So I have them taking Olimwaya Fashanu, offensive tackle, really build it up. Aaron Rodgers is coming back. You need to protect him. So that's my top 10. We'll run through some other picks that I think are pretty interesting here. I talked a lot yesterday about how I don't like J.J. McCarthy. And I stand by that take. I don't like J.J. McCarthy. I don't think he's going to be good in an NFL quarterback. But the amount of hype he's getting, I don't see him getting out of the first round. I think it'd be a mistake if he gets drafted in the first round, but I don't see him getting out of the first round. I have him in my mock going 12 to the Broncos. But if the Broncos don't end up taking him, I don't think he gets past the Raiders at 13, especially with their situation, having Aiden O'Connell under center. I don't know exactly what they're going to do there. So, yeah, I've got them taking J.J. McCarthy. There's a lot of offensive linemen that I've got going in this first round. I think I've got 9 offensive linemen going, 8 tackles and a center. And it's a deep offensive tackle draft. I was going through a lot of different mocks, and every single one of them had at least 7 offensive tackles off the board. So it made me feel a little bit better about this. Near the end, there's a bunch of corners and wide receivers as well. I think it's going to be one of those first rounds where you have quarterbacks, top-end wide receivers in the top 10, and the rest of it is corners, tackles, and those back-end wide receivers. So it's going to be an interesting draft. There's a lot of guys that could shake around. I think the cornerback rankings, that's going to depend a lot on what happens in the combine today and over the weekend. Cooper DeJean is not participating. He broke his leg. Terrion Armstead, Kenyon Mitchell, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Nate Wiggins, all these guys, I think the combine could be huge for their stock. I think a lot of them are pretty much set in the first round. But there's a lot that they could do for their draft stock in this combine. So keep an eye out for the corners. I think that's going to be the most important group to watch as we look at the results of the NFL Combine. But yeah, I appreciate everyone so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Like I said, you can check us out on YouTube, where you're watching this. Also on any podcast network, the full show will be out there. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.